We need more psychology. We need more understanding of human nature, because the only real danger that exists is man himself.
A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him.
I think we're in a dimensional reality where we don't communicate as human beings, we don't identify as human beings because of the way the distortions and the imprintings have been layered and imprinted into our consciousness.
It is the structure of the human brain. We know so much of how it's structured, but we all act as if that is not what's really affecting our lives.
Nothing in mental life happens by chance. This is the first of two foundational hypotheses upon which all psychoanalytic thought rests. They are simple, but their implications are enormous. Just as in physical nature, there is no randomness in the psyche. Every thought, every impulse, every slip of the tongue, every emotional reaction has a cause. What appears accidental is only the result of our ignorance of the underlying processes. Second hypothesis states that consciousness is the exception, not the rule. Most of mental life is unconscious. A person is ordinarily unaware of his motives, unaware of the forces shaping his philosophy of life, and unaware of the personal logic according to which he lives. Only through sustained effort and the right method can unconscious material be brought into awareness. These two principles, first articulated by Freud and later refined and clarified by Charles Brenner, have withstood more than a century of clinical observation and empirical support. They are not speculative ideas. They are laws of mental functioning. Any serious attempt to construct a functional model of the psyche must begin with them. Modern neuroscience and cognitive science have confirmed these principles, even though the terminology used to describe them has evolved. The second major contribution we borrow from Freud is the distinction between primary and secondary mental processes. This is not a moral distinction, it is a functional one, describing two modes of operation within the mind. We will not use the id, ego, superego model here. It is serviceable, but there is a cleaner and more precise alternative that we will introduce later. For now, the primary-secondary distinction is all we need. The primary process seeks the immediate discharge of tension. It is fast, automatic, associative, and emotional. It includes A. Instinctual and involuntary mental activity, the drives. Drives are to the mind what reflexes are to the body, automatic, powerful, and not under conscious control. B. Associative thinking. The mind links experiences based on emotional similarity, not logic. Old habits become associated with safety even when they are irrational or harmful. C. Emotion. Emotional memory can override long-term concerns. Pleasure, fear, longing, anger. These arise instantly without deliberation and without regard for consequences. The primary process is timeless, illogical, and immensely powerful. The secondary process delays the discharge of tension. It is slow, deliberate, logical, and reality-oriented. It includes A. Inhibition of drives and impulses. When an urge is present but cannot be acted upon, the secondary process holds it back. This is the psychological experience of enduring discomfort. B. Rational and empirical thinking. Focused logical thought requires the suppression of primary process activity. This is why rational thinking is effortful and quickly exhausting. C. The sense of time. Time exists only in the secondary process. In the moment of craving, impulse, or emotional surge, time disappears. Only when the secondary process activates does the concept of later become meaningful. In contemporary cognitive science, this distinction parallels what is known as dual process theory, the contrast between fast automatic processing and slow deliberate reasoning. These two modes of mental functioning are not abstractions. They correspond to distinct biological systems in the brain. The primary process aligns with the limbic system, amygdala, hippocampus, nucleus accumbens, fast, emotional, associative. The secondary process aligns with the prefrontal cortex, slow, deliberate, inhibitory, reality-oriented. The prefrontal cortex is the last region of the brain to develop. It reaches full maturity only in the late 20s or early 30s. The limbic system, by contrast, is fully operational early in life. This means the primary system is older, faster, and much more dominant in daily functioning. We live most of our lives in the primary process mode and only occasionally engage in secondary process activities. This is not a flaw, it is the design. The interaction between these two systems, one fast and emotional, the other slow and rational, forms the basic architecture of mental life. Primary and secondary processes describe how the mind operates, but they do not yet explain how the mind employs beliefs and interpretations to shape our emotional lives. To understand that, we must turn to cognitive psychology. Before we enter the theoretical framework of cognitive psychology, we must ask three fundamental questions. 1. What effort is required if we decide to alter the functions of our psyche? 2. What is a realistic timeline for meaningful change? 3. What are the dangers involved? These questions are not optional. They define the territory we are about to enter. Changing the structure of one's mind is possible, but it is not effortless, and it is not without risk. The psyche is not a machine that can be adjusted without consequence. It is a living system, and every change reverberates through the whole. If approached carelessly, cognitive work can destabilize rather than stabilize. Misapplied techniques can intensify anxiety, disrupt emotional balance, or create new patterns of avoidance. And because our psychological structures are interconnected, the effects extend not only to ourselves, but also to those closest to us. This is not a reason to avoid the work. It is a reason to approach it with clarity, patience, and respect. Cognitive psychology provides powerful tools, but tools are only as safe as the hands that use them. Our task in this chapter is to understand the architecture of cognition well enough to use these tools responsibly. Only then can we begin to alter the patterns that shape our emotional lives. The belief system is the ideological foundation of behavior. When people speak about the subconscious mind, this is usually what they mean. They may not define it precisely, but they feel its presence, the deeper structure that shapes how they interpret the world. The belief system is not a collection of opinions. It is the underlying framework that determines what we notice, what we ignore, what we assume about ourselves, others, and life itself. It is the lens through which all experience is filtered. Because it operates automatically, it feels like reality rather than interpretation. People describe the belief system constantly. They simply use different words. When someone says, "My subconscious keeps sabotaging me," they mean that their internal beliefs do not match their external expectations. When someone says, "I don't know why I behave this way," they mean that the beliefs organizing their behavior are operating below conscious awareness. When someone says, "Something deep inside me doesn't feel right about this," they are describing an internal conflict between two sets of beliefs, one rooted in limbic emotional memory, the other in prefrontal evaluation. In each case, what people call the subconscious is simply the belief system operating outside awareness. To understand how cognition shapes emotional life, we must clarify three practical concepts: schemas, cognitive distortions, and meaning making. Schemas are the mind's templates for organizing information. They determine what we notice, what we ignore, and how we interpret events. Cognitive distortions are predictable errors in conscious thinking, the surface expression of deeper interpretive biases. Meaning making is the process through which the mind interprets events. It is the bridge between cognition and emotion. Together, these concepts describe the conscious cognitive layer, the part of mental life that can be observed and modified. REBT begins with a simple idea: activating event, belief, consequences. Not the event itself, but the belief about the event produces the emotional reaction. This is both theoretically sound and practically observable. For example, activating event. Someone doesn't reply to your message. Belief: they're ignoring me. Consequences: anxiety, irritation, rumination. Or activating event: you make a mistake at work. Belief: this proves I'm incompetent. Consequences: shame, withdrawal, self-talk. The ABC model captures something real. Beliefs mediate emotional life. REBT relies on verbal disputation, challenging beliefs through language. This works reasonably well with a therapist who provides structure, regulation, and perspective, acting as a source of external prefrontal control. But as a method of self-analysis, REBT encounters limits. Language cannot reach pre-verbal beliefs. Emotional states distort reasoning. Defenses block honest examination. And the deepest beliefs are not linguistic in nature. REBT illustrates the conscious layer of interpretation, but it cannot access the mechanism that generates meaning automatically beneath awareness. Appraisal is the mind's automatic evaluation of what an event means. Emotion is not a reaction to the world, but to the meaning assigned to the world. Two people can experience the same event and feel different emotions because their appraisal, shaped by beliefs, memories, and expectations, is different. This is the engine beneath cognition. The mind interprets, the interpretation generates emotion. Appraisal theory shows why beliefs matter and why therapy targets meaning. It also reveals the limits of verbal methods. Appraisal operates faster than conscious thought and often beneath language. This brings us to the deeper question: what is the structure of the belief system that performs these appraisals? The word personality describes the totality of an individual, a physical being operating on a non-physical level of experience. The Greeks called this inner dimension the psyche. The Latin tradition used the word spirit. In the older Indo-European languages, the closest term would be soul. Different words, same idea. The part of us that interprets, organizes, and responds to the world. To understand how beliefs shape emotion, we now have to understand the structure of this inner system, the personality as a whole. To answer the question raised at the end of chapter 2, we must descend one layer deeper into the structure that generates beliefs themselves. When we speak of personality in psychology, we're not talking about traits and behaviors in isolation. We're talking about the entire inner system that interprets reality, the structure that gives meaning to experience, organizes perception, and maintains a coherent sense of self across time. This system is not limited to what we can articulate. Much of it operates beneath awareness, shaping how we appraise events long before thoughts become language. And while many theories focus on behavior or cognition, the deeper question is, what is the structure of this inner system and how does it maintain its own stability? One of the first psychologists to treat personality as a unified system was Prescott Leckey. He proposed that beneath our behaviors, emotions, and thoughts lies a single organizing principle, the drive for self-consistency. According to Leckey, the personality is not a collection of traits, but an integrated structure of beliefs that strives to maintain a coherent sense of who I am. Every perception, every interpretation, every emotional reaction is filtered through this internal organization. The idea of self is at the core, with the entire belief system organized around it, and the personality defends that core with remarkable persistence. But Leckey's model, as elegant as it is, leaves one dimension unexplained. He described how the personality organizes itself, how it defends its beliefs, and how it strives for self-consistency, yet he never fully integrated the unconscious processes that make interpretation possible in the first place. The personality does not begin with conscious thought. It begins with an inner field of appraisal, a pre-verbal automatic layer that evaluates experience before we are aware of it. This field shapes meaning, filters perception, and generates the emotional tone of our reactions long before beliefs become explicit. In other words, the belief system that Lecky described does not operate in a vacuum. It operates within an unconscious interpretive field that gives every experience its initial direction. This field is the missing dimension, the part of the personality that works beneath awareness, guiding interpretation, shaping emotion, and maintaining the coherence of the self from the inside out. This concept aligns with modern research on implicit appraisal, affective prediction, and non-conscious meaning construction. This unconscious interpretive field is not an abstract idea. It is crucial for understanding how the inner mechanism of personality develops, takes shape, and begins to operate within the environment it finds itself in, from birth to the present moment. Every experience, every interaction, every emotional imprint contributes to the formation of this field. And because most of this development happens before we have language, the deepest layers of personality are shaped long before we can describe them. By the time we become aware of ourselves, the field is already active, already interpreting, already guiding our reactions. In other words, the personality we consciously recognize is built upon a foundation that was formed beneath awareness. Within this unconscious field, the belief system begins to take shape. Long before we can speak, the mind is already forming patterns of meaning, primitive conclusions about safety, value, connection, and threat. These early appraisals solidify into the first layers of belief, and as we grow, new experiences are absorbed into the structure that is already there. The personality does not simply record events, it interprets them, organizes them, and fits them into a developing sense of self. By the time conscious identity emerges, the deeper architecture is already established, guiding perception from beneath awareness. As these early beliefs accumulate, the personality begins to organize itself around a single imperative to remain consistent with its own structure. This is the principle Lecky identified, the drive for self-consistency. Once the belief system takes shape, the personality defends it with relentless consistency, interpreting new experiences in ways that preserve the existing pattern. Even painful or limiting beliefs are maintained if they contribute to a coherent sense of identity. The personality would rather be consistent than accurate, and rather be stable than free, because coherence is the foundation of psychological survival. Once self-consistency becomes the central imperative, the personality begins to defend its structure. New experiences are not evaluated objectively. They are filtered, reshaped, or rejected to preserve the existing pattern of beliefs. This is where cognitive distortions, selective attention, and emotional reactions take on a protective function. They are not flaws in reasoning, they are defenses of identity. The personality bends perception to maintain coherence, even if that coherence is painful. In this way, the defensive organization becomes inseparable from the belief system itself, forming a closed loop that interprets the world in ways that confirm what the personality already assumes to be true. When the belief system and its defenses are in place, the personality becomes a self-maintaining structure. It interprets the world through the patterns it has already formed, and it reacts according to meanings that arise automatically from the unconscious field beneath awareness. This is the system we live inside, the system we call myself. But if we want to understand emotion, belief, and behavior at their source, we must look beneath the structure, into the mechanism that generates these interpretations in the first place. That mechanism cannot be reached through description alone. It must be experienced directly. And this is where we will turn in the sequel.